My guest today is an actor known for his roles on shows like Ryan's Hope, Dexter, and my personal favorite, Unhappily Ever After, the great Geoff Pierson. Geoff, it is an honor to be talking with you today. And I've heard that you like to golf. I've heard that they're quite the golf fan. So, how did you first get into golf?
Well, I first got into golf when I was a kid. I think I started when I was about 13, and my dad was a golfer, and I really started playing with him when I was, 13 or so through my teen years. And then through my 20s, I really kind of didn't play it very much. And then later in my 30s, I started playing it again. I've been playing it pretty much ever since. And I have two sons who play golf. And so, yeah, and my brothers play golf. So, yeah, we're a golfing family for sure.
Hey, right on, right on. Have you gone golfing at any point recently?
Yeah, well, I have a regular group of guys here in Los Angeles. Like we play on Monday. There's about 8 or 12 guys that play in the same outing, and always get together, at least once a year with my sons and my brothers, and we play golf. So yeah, it's a regular ongoing thing.
Hey,
Yeah.
nice, nice.
Mhm.
In your opinion, what would you say is the best round of golf that you've ever played?
That I've ever played?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I've played some. I mean, I'm a, like a nine, so I'm not a great golfer, but I'm a, decent golfer. But I've never shot even par, but I've shot like three over. That's probably the best I ever shot, like 75. One
Hey,
of my sons
right on.
practically a scratch golfer. He's an awfully good golfer, but yeah, yeah, we enjoy it.
I was so excited to see this. I saw that you were born and raised in Chicago, which is amazing. And it's actually where my mom is from as well. My mom is from Chicago. So
Mhm.
city is very near and dear to my heart. So what was just life like growing up in the Windy City?
Well, of course, when I was a kid, yeah, I was born there and I was there for the first couple of years. Then we moved to Detroit for a while. My father was in the steel business. And then we moved back to Chicago when I think I was still in kindergarten. We were only there for a couple of years in Detroit. And then growing up in Chicago, in those days, in the 50s and 60s, the stockyards were still there. The steel mills were still there. It was still a beautiful city in many ways, but it had a smell to it that, not a very nice smell in some places that doesn't have anymore. That's all gone. The stockyards and the steel mills are all gone. But it always was a beautiful city because of the lakefront. And, the city fathers back into the 19th century made sure that the lakefront could not be developed. They couldn't put any, apartment buildings or factories on it. And so it's remained, gorgeous all these years, and it still is probably the biggest, most beautiful part of Chicago, is the lakefront. But and all the parks and museums, they're there. But it was great growing up in Chicago, really, in those days. Yeah, it was terrific. We had Mayor Daley, Mayor Daley Sr. was the guy I remember most. He was a trip.
Yes, for sure. When you were growing up in Chicago, did you ever go to any of the like sports events like Cubs games or Bears
Yeah,
games?
we were White Sox fans. Even though I grew up on the
Really?
North Shore and the North Side, we were White Sox because my father's business was 3 blocks from Comiskey Park. So he used to get season tickets for customers, and we used to go to Comiskey Park. We went to some Cub games, but we were all White Sox fans in my family.
Oh,
And of course, like all Chicagoans, Bears fans and Blackhawks fans and Bulls fans, but baseball was the White Sox. Yeah.
hey, right on,
In
right
those
on.
days, you had to be either a White Sox fan or a Cub fan. You couldn't be. It was like in New York, you had to be a Dodger fan or a Yankee fan or a Giant fan. You couldn't be a fan of all the teams. Just you had to pick one.
Yes, yeah, for sure. Did you have any favorite White Sox players growing up?
Well, they won the pennant when I was 10 years old. So I used to have a pennant with all their names on it. Jim Landis, Nellie Fox, Louis Aparicio, Early Wynn, Turk Lown, Billy Pierce. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Sherm Lawler. Um, Was that my favorite team? I don't know. They've had some great teams since then, but yeah, I used to know all the players' names. I don't follow quite as closely anymore as I used to, but we used to in those days we collect baseball cards. We had shoe boxes full of baseball cards, so we knew all the players on all the teams. Of course, it was only 16 teams in those days.
Yeah, yeah, I know, right? It's
Now
it's
there's, I don't know,
grown
it's like
so
30
much
teams.
since then. It's crazy.
Yeah, yeah, it's changed a lot.
So how did you first get into acting?
Well, I got into acting when I was in college in New York. I started taking some classes in New York, and then I kind of got away from it after that. I got married and had a family, and I was moved back to Chicago. I was actually working in the steel business for a little while, and then I started getting into play. I started doing plays in Chicago. This would have been like mid '70s, and um, and then from there I went to drama school moved back to the East Coast and went to drama school for 3 years at Yale Drama School. And then from then on, I was in New York and I was doing a lot of plays. And then I got into daytime television. I was doing soap operas in New York in the 80s. And and then I was doing a lot of plays in the regional theater. And then what happened was eventually in the early 90s, I started doing mainly sitcoms in Los Angeles. And then I moved from New York to Los Angeles to do one particular sitcom, and then I ended up staying here. And then after that, I started doing dramas and film, hour dramas and films as well. But how that's how I really got into it. I started when I was like 20 years old.
What was it just about the acting profession that sort of attracted you to that? What was it just about the profession?
Yeah, I know it was interesting in my case because I never did any plays in high school or college. I was not theatrical in that way. Um, I guess like when I said, when I started taking these classes just to see if I had any knack for it or not. Um, it's sort of an idea I think I'd harbored for a few years when I was a teenager, thinking that maybe I would do that. I viewed it as a way of, obviously storytelling, but also a way of expressing yourself in a way that you wouldn't in normal life. That's really the way I look at it because still am, but I was a very introverted person, and I was not at all, you know, um, what's the word, exhibitionist, or not that's not the word I meant, but particularly outgoing. But I thought I could inhabit these characters. So that's I think was the main impulse for me to get into it, to be able to explore these different characters.
Got your bachelor's degree at Fordham, and then you got your master's at Yale. Just overall, how would you describe your college experience at both of those universities?
Well, I'll tell you, that's an interesting question because when I was in undergraduate at college at Yale, at Fordham, all hell broke loose. All hell broke loose. This was in the late 60s. And it was a very disruptive environment, not only in New York, but all over the country. It started at Columbia in '68, but it was going on all over. I mean, when I was a junior in college, the Kent State riots happened where people were killed. They mainly were anti-Vietnam War protests going on, but it was other things as well because it was the convergence of the civil rights movement, the so-called sexual cultural revolution this was all happening in the mid late 60s and into the 70s with the women's movement, the second women's liberation movement, so forth. So this was all happening then, and it was extremely distracting from being a college student. I mean, because of all that was going on. In fact, when I was in college, my junior year, the school was taken over by a protest and it was shut down, just like it was at Columbia, just like it was at Kent State, just like it was in California, in Berkeley, several other schools. It was happening all over the country, mainly, again, fueled by the anti-Vietnam War protest. So that was going on. So that was a wild time, I would say, in college, very disruptive, very, you know, this whole cultural revolution was going on. And then, we're living with the, results of that really to this day. Now later, as I went to graduate school at Yale 6 years later, and by this time I already had a wife and two daughters. So that experience was generally quite good in the sense if you to prepare someone to be an actor was generally quite good, simply because you were constantly doing plays. You were constantly doing plays, and you were constantly working with directors and other actors, most of whom were very, very good. And So it was a good training ground for sure. It's funny, Sam, when I went there, I never expected to stay for 3 years because I thought I'd go for 1 year and move back to New York and so forth. But I ended up staying the entire 3 years. And that's really when I started being a full-time actor when I got out of there. That was 1980. So it's been 45 years since then. Yeah.
Many people know you from your role on Ryan's Hope, but you
Yes.
actually did another daytime series before Ryan's Hope called Texas.
Yes.
What was your
Well,
experience?
at one time or another, I did almost all the soap operas in New York, certainly all the ABC ones and a couple of other ones too, because I started doing Texas. What had happened when I'd done a play on Broadway with George C. Scott, and right after that closed, I got a call to do like a job for 3 days. I didn't even know what it was. It was out in Brooklyn, but it was called Texas. And I ended up doing that for like a year. I think 10 months or a year, recurring as this police detective. And then from Texas, I did one called Another World, which after that, and then I did Ryan's Hope for like 3 years, where I played Frank Ryan. And then after that, I had done Search for Tomorrow, Loving, One Life to Live. Maybe there's others, little recurring roles. I did another stint on Another World, so I did most of them, which was very common in those days. In the 80s, soap operas were huge. There were 14 of them on the air. Now I think there's three left. The genre is pretty much ended, since those days. But in those days in the 80s, every actor was doing some kind of daytime, trying to get jobs on those shows because it was a source of work for people, even people who are film actors or stage actors. But yeah, I did a lot of those. Yeah. Texas was a lot of fun. Texas was a lot of fun. I remember I didn't know anything about soap operas when I first introduced to it. So it was a revelation to me, just how it operates. And there are certain adjustments you have to make for it, obviously, just like any, if you're doing film or television or stage. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the whole time I was on it. Especially Ryan's Hope, of course. That's my favorite because that was such a great show, and the people and everything. It's nice. It's not very nice. It was a good
Oh,
role for
of
me. I
course.
liked the role. Yeah.
Just getting this early experience on soap operas, which is obviously something that requires a lot of preparation. How important was it gaining this experience, going forward in your career?
Well, it's hard to say because I've known very, very good actors who have told me they couldn't do soap operas because the amount of material you have to learn on a daily basis and then do it the next day with very, very little rehearsal. They just don't like the process, because it's too immediate. It's too surface, for them. They like to get more into the roles and so forth. And I completely understand that because I got quite adept at, learning these scripts very quickly. Part of what helps you learning is the stories move relatively slowly. So, you're not getting a lot of brand new material all the time. It's always sort of in the same vein until the denouement, actually happens. But yeah, I think in a way it prepares you for other things. There's a lot of people who only do daytime and they spend their careers doing that, and that's great. I've known a lot of people, friends of mine who've done that. My career in this business has been um, perhaps a bit unusual in that I went from the theater to soap operas, daytime television, from daytime television to sitcoms, and then from sitcoms to dramas in film and television. So, and there's been, intertwining, intervening things in the, and plus the stage. I haven't done many plays in recent years, but I did do an awful lot of plays also in regional theater and in New York, and one out here in Pasadena as well. But yeah, any kind of working prepares you for other jobs. But um, I've worked in all genres, stage, film, daytime, television, everything. Um, and made very minor, little adjustments in doing them all. But I think any kind of work prepares you for the others as well. Yeah, yeah, it's good.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you ever consider, or would you ever be interested in getting back on stage and doing some more stage work?
I would. I would, depending on the play. I mean, I've tried to look at things recently. I mean, the last play I did was probably more than 10 years ago. It was at the Pasadena Playhouse. It was a production of the Lillian Hellman play, The Little Foxes. It was, quite a good production. Um, but really, since I moved to LA, there has not been a lot of theatrical productions. There was another one I did also in Massachusetts a few years before that, that eventually went to New York, but I couldn't do it because I was doing something else at the time. But um, yeah, I really like doing it, but I just really haven't found anything, or it really hasn't come up very often in recent years, to tell you the truth. People, when you're here doing television and film, it's not like your agents, your representatives are looking for stage work because they're looking for more financially, viable projects, obviously, and it's usually you have to, there's not a lot of money in theater, quite frankly, but you have to find a play that you really want to do for good reasons.
Now, in 1983, you began your tenure on Ryan's Hope, and this show was not only big for your career, but really for your life in general, as you met your wife Callie on the show. What you
Well, well, Kelly, yes, I met her on that show, but I mean, I was already married and had three children at that time. I mean, I met Kelly there, but we got married many, many years later after my first marriage ended. And we got married. I met her on that show in the mid 80s, but we didn't get married till the late 90s when she had already moved to California. And eventually I went to California to do these, sitcoms, Unhappily Ever After, Grace Under Fire, other ones as well.
mm,
Yes, I did meet her. That was a yes. Yeah.
wow, wow, wow. No, it's sort of one of those crazy things, I guess, where this stuff, where like things kind of end up coming back around in life, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's amazing how many, how, things that seem to be completely random, turn out to be life-changing. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know it's pretty amazing how things can sometimes work out that way. What do you remember from your first your first sort of interactions with her, like back then at that point in time?
When I first met her,
Yes,
when I first met my Callie, my wife now.
yes.
Well, they brought her down from Canada. What happened was on that show, they hired a new showrunner. The woman who had, when I first went on the show, actually, I started there in late 82, but my episodes went on early 83. But um, the woman who had created the show was a woman named Claire Labine. And she had left. She started, I think, in 75 or 6, the show. So this was 82. And she had left, and there had been two or three other actors who had played Frank Ryan before I came on. So when she came back, the previous Frank Ryan had already left the show. And so they didn't have one for about a year or more than a year. So they were looking to recast that role. And Claire came back and she took over the show. And then that's when they cast me in it. And then after a year or so, she left again and went off to do something else. And they had different showrunners. And anyway, they just hired a new guy. And so he was bringing in a lot of new people. And he brought in, and he found Callie up in Toronto. They found, the casting people found, were casting all over the country and in Toronto as well. So they found her there, brought her into New York, and many people. I mean, the list goes is deep. Of this guy brought in a lot of new people, and the show changed quite a bit. But my first impression of her, which of course she was very young, but my first impression of her was that she was, very, very arresting and very talented. She seemed very talented. She actually came on with the former MGM film star Gloria DeHaven, who played her mother. They came on together with a new storyline, and the two of them together were a hoot. You can imagine. I don't know if people know who Gloria DeHaven is anymore, but she was a big star back in the 40s, in MGM. She worked for Sinatra, everybody, Gene Kelly, everybody.
It's been 30 years. I mean, I can't believe it. It's crazy. It's been 30 years since Unhappily premiered on the WB. And of course, that network, sadly doesn't even exist anymore. Um, but such a hilarious and wonderful show. How did your role on Unhappily come about?
Yeah, that came about because I was recurring on this other actually hit show on ABC called Grace Under Fire. And I was living in New York at the time, and I had come out to Los Angeles to shoot that show. I guess it was the summer of '94, I want to say. So I think that's when it went on. And and then I'd come out and do an episode and then go back, back to New York. And I did that a couple times. And then my agents sent me the script for Unhappily Ever After. And I knew who Ron Levitt was because Ron Levitt had created Married with Children. And the guy who played Al Bundy, Ed O'Neill, is a good friend of mine. He and I were friends. We'd done plays together in New York. So I knew who Ron was. And I knew what he wrote. I knew the kind of stuff he wrote because I knew the Married with Children, which had become a big hit at that point. So they sent me the script and they said, well, when you're out here to do Grace Under Fire, come in and meet Ron and Arthur Silver, who were the two showrunners. So that's how it came about. So when I came into LA and I went and I saw them and we read some stuff from the script. And then I think I went back to New York and then eventually I think I went on tape. They put you on tape. They do like a screen test. And then I eventually, got tested for, I guess they tested a few guys. I'm not sure how many. And then that's how I got the role.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you were a guest star on Married with Children at one point.
Yes. At one time, I think in the first season, I was out visiting Ed in Los Angeles. He had moved out there, obviously, to do Married with Children. He had just moved from New York. And he said, come on and do the show while you're here. So I did this little guest star role in, I think, the first season. Yeah. It's funny because in '94, because we'd done that show, I want to say in '88. So it was like 6 years later. And I don't really remember having spent any time or met Ron 6 years earlier. I knew who he was. And I don't know if he remembered me, to tell you the truth, but because a lot of time had passed. But the thing about Ron is he was kind of he was a bit of a comedic genius in many ways. I mean, we used to shoot that show, and then we'd usually be there on Friday nights till 3 hours in the morning, after midnight, reshooting, and he'd get different ideas, and we'd do different scenes after the audience had left and so forth. But he was a terrific guy, anything he came up with comedically, because he'd be open. If I came up, I said, let's try this, let's try that. But almost anything he came up with was gold. I mean, this guy, it was amazing. And Ed had the same opinion of him. Ed, I spent 5 years with him. Ed spent like 10 or 11 years with him. And both of us, never had a crossword, with him. I mean, we love the guy. Unfortunately, he's gone now. He died quite young. I think he was 61 or two.
Well, absolutely, yeah, yeah. Ron was, truly truly one of the greats.
He
Absolutely.
was, and he was just a great guy to work with. He made the whole environment of the show so, congenial and so just harmonious. He's that kind of guy, it was just a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I actually had the pleasure of interviewing Stephanie Hodge a while
Stephanie, yeah,
back. Yeah,
yeah.
yes. Yeah, very sweet lady, super great person. And she said that she learned a lot from you while working on Unhappily, for her experience. So I'm curious, what were the biggest things that you learned yourself during your time on the show?
Well, it's funny. I said to Ron Levitt at one point, I said, I've done all these serious plays and all these dramas and so forth, and I'm going to be known as like this wife-beating hillbilly on Grace Under Fire because I played her ex-husband who was, a reformed alcoholic. And anyway, and he said, no, 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 you're going to be known for this show, meaning his show, Unhappily Ever After. Um, Yeah, I'd done sitcoms before. I had a knack for Ron's um, milieu, you know, what Ron wrote, the kind of absurdist comedy. For some reason, I took to it right away. So the comic timing was very, connected between me and Ron. So that was great. I learned a lot about, I'd learned something about comedy doing like summer stock. I used to do a lot of summer stock plays and comedies, and I'd hear the roar of the audience. So you learn about timing and things like that.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, it was definitely an advanced course in comedy with Ron Levitt. And of course, Stephanie was an absolute doll. And it's funny because I was hired first, right? And I tested with a lot of actresses for that role. And they came to me at one point and says, we have this actress we think would be very good for it, and so forth and so on. And then I eventually ended up testing with Stephanie. And I tested with, I don't know, maybe a dozen people, a dozen actresses. And it was so obvious when I tested with her that she was the right person for the role. You know what I mean? You'd think, oh, well, there's so many, and they were all good. And you'd think, oh, well, it's a tough decision. Actually, no. It was so obvious, not only to me, but to Ron and to the producers and the network and everybody. So we were lucky to get her, no doubt, because she was right there with that Ron Levitt humor. I mean, she got it. And that's what made it so funny. Now, the thing about it is, Sam, that Ron did have to adjust that show because the show really was supposed to be Married with Children Part Two. They finally get divorced because the Bundys had a quote unquote dysfunctional marriage. So
Mhm.
what Ron was going to try to explore was what happens after they split up, and that was the first season. What happened was, because we didn't know the WB, they didn't know who the audience would be. It turned out the audience skewed extremely young. We didn't know that at the time, I mean, like teenagers and 20 something. So Ron had to make a lot of adjustments in the show. He didn't do the show he originally set out to do because we had to adjust it because we had to make, focus more like on the teenagers and the high school. And then we couldn't be divorced anymore. I moved back into the house, but lived in the basement. In the first season, I have my own place, and it's a horrible place. It's
Yep.
funny, it's hilarious. But Ron had to do that to keep the show on the air. So he did whatever he needed to do to keep the show on the air, and he managed to do it, for 5 seasons. So
Yeah. I believe it hit at right at 100 episodes, like
yeah, and by
smack
the
dab
way,
at it.
if you watch it today, the show is hilarious. I mean, it stands up. It
Oh,
totally stands up.
absolutely.
It could be on the air today. It would be fun, except it's extremely politically incorrect. So I don't know if it could be on today. It might offend people. I don't know. But that's what Ron did. He was there to offend people. That's what Married with Children was about. That's what this was about. I don't know. Maybe they couldn't put it on today. Who knows?
Do you have any favorite episodes from the show that stick out to you?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, there's 100 of them. It's hard. I probably there's some I don't even remember at all. But if I saw them, I'd remember doing them. I remember the one with Kevin and I playing basketball. That was a lot of fun. Where I couldn't
Yeah.
I couldn't let him win in basketball. Even though he was so childlike, he couldn't let his own son win at basketball. That was fun. But there were so many. There were so many. I think when Floppy goes on the lam, he drives to Mexico. That was a funny one. That
Yep.
was hilarious. It was just me and Bobcat, and that was crazy. So many though. It's funny
Yeah.
because all my children in that show, Stephanie's and my children, Kevin and Nikki and Justin, they all went on to have, terrific careers,
Yeah.
because they worked a lot because Justin was in Malcolm in the Middle, and then Kevin got Entourage, and then Nikki had her own show, and then she was in another show, and they've all done great.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that I just think is like to me what makes the show special. I mean, obviously it's just a fun show, not afraid to take risks. There's
Mhm.
obviously the fourth wall breaking is great in the show, but I think that along with just the chemistry that the cast has, everyone has such great comedic chemistry.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah,
what's
no, it
really
was
special.
great. Yeah, it was great in that respect. I mean, Kevin and Nikki and Justin, they were all terrific. I mean, and they really got it. And it's funny because very often when you make a pilot, especially a comedy pilot, they'll recast a lot of the roles. This there was no recasting. Those were the three we got from the beginning. Um, and they were all terrific. And our puppeteer, Alan Troutman, he was a genius. The guy worked with Jim Henson. He was a genius puppeteer. And of course, Bob would come in and do the voice. But so with Alan's puppetry skills and with Bob's crazy, Bobcat Goldthwait voice, it was a hilarious character. And of course, that character was really Ron Levitt's mouthpiece. See, that was where Ron got off every week because very often the Mr. Floppy character would be talking about something that had nothing to do with the show. He'd be spouting off about the, French army or something, I mean, these crazy topics that it was just something that Ron, had a burr under his saddle about, and Mr. Floppy would spout off, which was, hilarious. And that was really him on the show.
Well, speaking of Mr. Floppy, you might get a kick out of this, Geoff. Christina, I had the pleasure of interviewing Christina Lynch, who is a writer and
Oh, Christina,
producer.
one of our great writers. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, a wonderful person. I had the pleasure of interviewing her a while back, but she was very nice enough to send me something through the mail. You might get a kick out of this.
Oh, you got a Mr.
Yep,
Floppy
it's
doll.
Mr.
Look at that.
Floppy.
Well, Bob and I have, I really kept in touch with Bob more than anybody from those days because Bob and I have done several films together because, he's an auteur. Bob has written and directed several films, three or four of which I've done with him. And we've been to Sundance a couple of times with his films. So we haven't done one recently, like in the last few years, but there was a while there we were doing them pretty much, one after the other. And I hope Bob is still, I mean, I just saw him maybe a year ago or within the last year, although he's moved to Chicago now, but I see him at different events where we get together. And I hope he's still, I'm sure he is still working on something. So he may come up with something more. We did one that you might know called The World's Greatest Dad with Robin Williams. I think
Yes.
it was one of Robin's last movies. And that was a really very moving film in many ways. I thought it was some of Robin Williams' probably best thing he ever did in terms of his acting. And Bob, I think, wrote that for him to do that role. Because they go way back. Those two guys go way back, before either one of them was well known.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, that's something else I was gonna mention. I think it's so great that you and Bobcat have continued to have these collaborations
Yeah.
over the years and you mentioned World's Greatest Dad, but also films like Windy City Heat, God Bless America, just a lot of fun
Yes.
movies.
Yes. 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 Sleeping Dogs Lie. I forget what some of them were. Um, well, Windy City Heat, I remember I showed up for that because last year they had like a 20th or 25th year anniversary for it. And Jimmy Kimmel was one of the producers. He was there. We had it over in the theater in Westwood here. And I remember when I showed up to do that, Bob says to me, "We're all going to hell for this one," because of this guy, the crazy guy who was the central character in that movie. He actually thought I was the president of show business. I mean, it beggars belief, but apparently it's on the level. So anyway, yeah, that was one of the many fun ones we did.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And just from your perspective, what makes Bobcat such a great person to work with on these projects?
Well, it's a couple things. I mean, first and foremost, it's what he writes. It's from a perspective that's very unique. It's very individual. It's him. It's not generic. It's not common. It's not ordinary. It's his own slant on things. And then secondly, he's a skilled filmmaker, and he makes the set very very calm, very creative, um, very motivated with very quietly. He's very quiet. He has that screaming character. That's not who he is. That's strictly a character he invented. In real life, he's very quiet, very simple, speaks in simple sentences. You know what I mean? Not verbose. So, uh, so making films with him is just terrific, terrific. I mean, that's why he gets such good people to be in those movies. So many of them. I mean, I can't even rattle off all the names, but a lot of people.
Do you still keep in touch with anyone else from Unhappily?
Well, Not really. I used to, one of my closest golfing buddies was a director on Jerry Cohen, who had also directed many, many episodes of Married with Children. And Jerry, but he moved up to the Sacramento area, so I don't really see him very much anymore. But I did keep in touch with him 'cause when he was in LA for years afterward. But like I say, he's moved away. Um, the actors, I don't see any of the actors really. No, but it's been a long time.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah,
you said, what did you say? 30 years? No, 25. How long has it been?
yeah. It's been 30 years
25
since the
years.
show premiered.
Since it started. That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. Since it went on the air. That's right. That's right. I didn't think of that. Yeah, because we started shooting them in late 94 and I think went on the air in early 95. Yeah.
It's crazy. The passage of time.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yes.
something
Wait for no
else.
man. That's right.
Um, I do quickly just want to mention the finale of the show, the 100th episode, because I think, as we've kind of been talking about, it's this fun, wild show, but it's a really sweet ending, kind of in the end, when Floppy dies and then is brought back to life, with the drinking beer and everything, and then you and Floppy are singing the original theme song from the first season that Bobcat sang. I think it's kind of a sweet ending,
Yes. Yes. Well, I don't remember the particulars of it, but that doesn't surprise me that that would be the last one because Ron was a sentimental guy. I mean, with all his brash humor, he really was a really heartfelt kind of a guy. That's the kind of person he was. But his humor was very confrontational and very, some would say, crude, but intentionally offensive. But that's what comedy is. I mean, what is Mel Brooks, for God's sake, right? It's intentionally offensive. I mean, that's what it is. That's what comedy is. That's what they say nowadays. There's kind of a chill in the environment where comics, not just vulgarity, no, that's not funny, comics being vulgar, but even being clever or commenting on certain sacred cows that you're not supposed to. That's kind of dampens the whole comedy environment. But when Ron was doing it, you could still do it. You know,
yeah.
when Mel Brooks was doing it, he could still do it. I don't know if he could do it today. But hopefully, we'll move beyond that. Because the pendulum swings both ways.
I think it would be amazing if maybe some point in the future we got an Unhappily Ever After revival series. I think,
Wouldn't that be something?
yeah, that
Yeah,
would be really
I could
cool.
definitely see that.
I
But
mean,
Disney owned the show. The show was owned by Disney, a
yeah,
division called Touchstone, no longer exists, I don't think. But they still own the show.
yeah,
So
I would love. I mean, I would love it if they put it on Disney Plus. I think that would be so huge to really introduce the show to like new audiences. I think that would be
absolutely.
amazing.
Sam, you should get on that. That sounds like a great idea to me.
Yeah. Well, maybe I can get on the phone with Bob Iger and I can,
Yeah, get on the phone with Bob Iger
yeah,
while he's still there, before the profits go down any further.
right, exactly. Um, Now, a film that you starred in, I'm really excited to talk about this. You starred in a movie called The Right Way, which I read
Yes,
was also the last film role for the great Cesar Romero.
that's correct.
Um, what memories do you have from making that film?
Well, I have a lot of memories of that, Sam. I have a lot of memories of that. I think we did that, I want to say 1994 or something like that, somewhere around there. Um, that was a film that the producer director, a guy named George Taglianetti, I met him in New York, and he told me about the film. They were going to shoot it in Brooklyn because it takes place in Brooklyn. And then, for whatever reason, it kind of dragged on for a few years. And he kept calling me, I've got so and so, I've got so and so. And he ended up getting a pretty good cast because not only Cesar Romero, but he got George, now I'm blanking on Santos. No, not George Santos. I forget his first name. He used to be on Rockford Files. And and then the guy who played my father was a very well-known actor. I'm blanking on his name right now. He played Joe DiMaggio. Anyway, he got this, but anyway, years went by, and finally he said, oh, and Johnny Martino, who was Fredo in The Godfather, Johnny was in it. But there was a few other people in. But he finally said, "We're going to shoot it in Los Angeles." And I said, "George, you can't shoot it in Los Angeles. It takes place in Brooklyn." "No, no, no. We're going to do the exteriors in Brooklyn, but we're going to. I got a guy who has a factory in Los Angeles in South Central, and we're going to shoot the stuff, the factory stuff there and so forth." Anyway, that's what we ended up doing. I never really met Cesar Romero because he was never there the same day I was, and I think they did his whole part in like a couple of days or a day or two. But that was his last film. He was quite good in it. Was it George Santos? Because the scene was with him. I don't know why I'm blanking on his name. But it was kind of a fly-by-night thing, in a way, in many ways. I haven't seen it since he first screened it when he made it 30 years ago now, in 94. So I don't know where did you see it somewhere? Or
Yeah,
just
yeah. So that's a great question. So I believe on YouTube, like and sort of just on the internet somewhere, like I was able to find like a good couple clips of the
oh
film. I was able to find some clips and I mean it looks amazing, but I've been dying to see the full picture. I
yeah.
would love to see it sometime because your performance in this, from what I've seen, I mean it's great. It's raw, gritty, and I love that stuff. So I would
Yeah.
love to see
I
the
don't know
full
where it can
film.
be seen anymore. Maybe they'll put it up on YouTube or so. I don't know.
Yeah. It's sort of a mystery, but I would
Yeah.
love to see it someday.
Well, the film, never got any distribution. It went right to video or whatever tapes, whatever it was when it was made. Never, I don't think it had a theatrical run. I saw it in a theater in New York when he screened it, when he first finished it, but I haven't seen it since.
What are the parts of your career that you would say have been the most rewarding?
Well, I very much enjoyed doing the role of Frank Ryan on Ryan's Hope. I liked that a lot. I did two pictures with Clint Eastwood. I enjoyed that a lot. They were both period pieces. One was 1919 and one was 1929. They were both around the same time, but they were both period pieces. They were both terrific. And I enjoyed those. I've enjoyed a lot of plays I've done. Um, and obviously, I enjoyed spending those 5 seasons with Ron Levitt doing Unhappily Ever After. That was very enjoyable. Yeah, that was the most fun I think to do. Out and out fun. Um, but I was the police captain on Dexter for 8 years, so
Yes.
that turned out to be a big hit show for Showtime. It kind of put them on the map. And Michael Hall was so terrific in it, and all the other actors as well. And that was a great show. It was good to to be involved with that show. And then I spent 3 years doing a show called Designated Survivor with Kiefer Sutherland. And it's funny because I had done 24, and Kiefer and I had never worked together because why would we? I played the president, and he played, a CIA or an FBI guy. We would never have any reason. But then when I did Designated Survivor with him, pretty much all our scenes were together because I played the ex-president coming in to advise him because he was a neophyte president. He had been thrust into the job. And then we had three different shows. For 3 seasons, we had three different showrunners on that show also. So each guy that came in kind of changed it according to where he wanted to go. And so we started out as colleagues and we ended up as mortal enemies. But that was a good show too.
So I want to mention this. You're also on Cameo, where you give video messages to fans.
Yeah, I
And
don't know how I got onto that. Somebody told me about it and they requested that I do it. And occasionally someone will come and you give them a birthday message or something. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think it's super cool. Like just, I mean, I guess how fun is it to kind of connect with your fans and who kind of appreciate your work and send them a nice little message.
Well, yeah, that's right. That's the way I look at it too, and whenever I'm out and, people ask me for a signature or a photo, I always do it. I always do it. And I get stuff in the mail all the time to send them, some picture or sign a picture that they've sent to me. And I always do it because, I think I know a lot of people object to it and they say, they for whatever reason they don't want to do it. But I figure if people appreciate what you've done enough, and it makes them it gives them a little joy or happiness. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. I think people where it invades their privacy, then they object to it. But you know, that's rare. That's a rare occasion that happens. It never. No one ever comes up to me to harass me. Quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. So I haven't had that problem.
And just in addition to everything that we've been talking about, I mean, you're also a father as well. Just what's that journey been like for you, being a father and being able to watch your kids grow up?
Well, that's been probably, well, not probably, that's been the greatest thing in my life. There's no doubt about it. I mean, that's to me, that's number one. Because I have five children, they're all grown now. Um, um, and they're all doing fantastic. So, yeah, you're right. Watching them and my grandchildren now, that's the most important thing in my life and the most, I get the most joy from that of anything. Yeah. And
And
that's been a journey because bear in mind, I've been a father since I was 21 years old. So I started very young. So I became a very young father. And then when I got married a second time, I became a very, older father, not ancient, but older. So I've, run the gamut. I have, my three grown children are almost a generation ahead of my two youngest who are now, well, the last one is still in college, but my youngest daughter just graduated from college in London last summer. And she's an artist. She's a phenomenal artist. And then my son has one more year of college in Colorado, and then he'll be out. And the other three are grown with families of their own, and they're doing, like I said, fantastic. So yeah, I mean, I've been blessed, very, very blessed when it comes to having children. Yeah, they've all had wonderful mothers, and I've been, as good a father as I know how to be. And so I hope they, I know they appreciate that too. But, my oldest daughter actually has a book. She wrote a book that for young readers called Back to Bainbridge. And she's now going around the country, doing book signings and reading from the book. And I hear she's up for some kind of award. So my other daughter is back in New York. She's fantastic. My son is in, I told you, Phoenix, and then the other two. My one daughter is still in England where she's doing postgraduate work, and then my son here. So they're all doing fantastic. And like I said, I just been very, very blessed. Yeah.
that's fantastic. Last question here. What is
Yeah.
the single biggest piece of advice that you have for aspiring actors?
Well, it's funny because this is a question you're asked any actor who's, in any way, on the public consciousness is asked this fairly often. And the way I look at it, it's there is no set way to do it. It seems like everybody who arrived at whatever degree of success they've been able to attain did it a different way. Um, but I would say an aspiring actor, I would say, it's pretty much traditional. You get the training. The training really is just doing it over and over and over again to get adept at doing the trade. It's really a skill and get adept at doing that. Um, and also be realistic with yourself. I mean, see what kind of feedback you get. I got a lot of extremely positive feedback from the time I first started to dip my toe in and explore it. So if you get a lot of positive feedback, then just keep with the training until you start to get opportunities to work, and then try to find roles that you can do, obviously, that you can do best. Um, but if you find that you're getting resistance, you also have to, I think people have to be realistic uh, because it's not a thing. It's not for everybody. It's definitely not for everybody, and it's not an easy life by any means. I mean, people think you see people on TV and they stumble into it. It usually doesn't happen that way. I mean, it does happen sometimes, but basically, you're always going from one job to the next. So it's not for everybody. It's not for everybody. There's very little continuity in it. You're constantly, you know, moving from one job to the next. If you're lucky enough to keep getting hired. So yeah, I'd say when you're young and you have an ambition for it, get the training, see what kind of positive feedback you get. If you get plenty of positive feedback, keep going as long as you can. And if you don't, be realistic. I mean, a lot of people move into other areas of it. There's so many different things you can do in the business that aren't in front of a camera or on the stage. Obviously, a lot of people do that. But yeah, that would be my advice. Just start out, get the training, and see what kind of opportunities come up from there. I mean, that's actually kind of what I did, really. You know, I never moved to Hollywood. I went and studied it in New York and then at Yale and different places. So did that help me in my career? I don't know. It's hard to say. You know what I mean? It's hard to say because there's people who have no training who do very well. They just have a knack for it or whatever. Or, their particular whatever they do is valuable in the marketplace, and that does happen. But I always trained as an actor, so I was doing a lot of stage. It wasn't just as uh, a hit sitcom or something like that. I mean, I've been on a lot of sitcoms, but the way I trained was to do different roles. And in Hollywood, if you're going to do films and television, you don't necessarily have to do different roles, very, very different from yourself. You have to have kind of a brand, a thing you do, and you're known for. Unless you want to keep, doing like you take an Al Pacino, right? He's constantly doing, or when he was younger, not only was he a film star, but he's constantly doing plays as well because he liked to do plays. He's doing all kind of characters in plays, including Shakespeare and others. Christopher Walken, the same thing. When I was at Yale, I did 2 plays with Christopher Walken, so he was already had won an Oscar for Deer Hunter, and he's doing plays. Because those guys are both from New York. A lot of New York actors, they have that in them that they want to keep doing, be in the theater and involved in that kind of thing because they're doing different roles. Hollywood, not so much. It's different because you're trying to, establish yourself as a certain identity, in films or television. But either way, I think the best way is what I suggested. I think people who just come to LA and try to get into television, that's probably not the way to do it.
Geoff, thank you so much.
All right, Sam.
Some of your time today. I mean, getting to converse with you, I mean, such an honor. So just thank you so much.
Well, my pleasure. All the best to you.